now that we're in phase 2 and you're starting phase 2, you see what it looks like. We need to start talking about, well, actually shooting your arrows or getting arrows or bullets or cannonballs or whatever you are shooting to match your theme onto your screen, and how to make that happen and how to make physics work. So here's what we have. Basically, I just have a little playground here, and the important thing is that here in my library, you have a bullet or an arrow or whatever it is that you're shooting. It's a movie clip, and inside there I have some codes set up for you. So in your bullet you have a code layer, and that code layer it's going to need a function that will cause the thing to move, and so that's going to happen each frame. So you have each enter frame event that's going to call some mover function. Now, spoiler alert, you will also need some variables to keep track of your speed and your bearing. So how fast you're going and what direction you're going in becomes very important, and so every bullet will have to keep track of that for himself, and he will be tasked with moving himself. Now that you've seen the bullet, let's go back to scene 1. Sorry again, I still don't have my mic when I'm making this video, so the keyboard sounds like an elephant again, but we'll make it. So back on your main timeline, I just have a little button that when it clicks will call this function. So number one thing to remember is that bullet is now a data type because I have it linked here. The number one thing to remember is that when you click this, just because you said that you wanted a new bullet doesn't mean that it is visually on the screen. It's not on your display list in Flash. So I'm going to tell them I'm on the main timeline. I'm going to tell the main timeline to add a child. And so now I don't know where that thing's going to end up because I just said to add it. Oh, he's right there at 0, 0. So let's do this. Let's say let's have a little more control. Well, that was a bad choice. Let's try that again. 400 might have been a little too much. Ah, there he is. Okay, so but again, he does not exist visually on your screen until you add child. So if I don't add the child, he doesn't show up, even though he exists. He's just not part of the display list, and then when I add child, he's there, part of the stage. Now, and right now that's all that happens, is that he shows up and he sits there. Now, something that's very interesting to note is the sequence of events when things are added to the stage. So all of this code that's just floating around right here, when I say floating, I mean it's not in a function, it's not attached to an event. When I'm in the bullet, so sorry, I'm in the bullet movie clip on his code layer, this code that's just floating right here will get executed one time only, and that's when you land on this frame, and you won't land on this frame until the thing is added to the stage. So when the bullet's added to the stage, it will visually draw it, which will land you on this frame and cause that code to happen. So, and I'm placing all my bullets on the same spot. Now, that's just a little interesting tidbit to know about the display list. But this move me function is a lie right now, and once again, sorry, I'm in my bullet movie clip. That's better. This move me function is a lie because it's not moving me. Now, since I am a movie clip, I have inherited an X attribute that I will change. And so here it comes. When I hit this, I will construct the arrow, I will add it to the main timeline, and voila. Now, what just happened is this add event listener happened by itself, but when I added the child, the bullet itself got visually added to the screen. That caused Flash to come to this frame, call that, which then triggered this to happen 24 times a second. Now, that is not really what you want to happen. You don't really want it to just go off in its own direction horizontally. You want to be able to dictate that. Now, there are a couple different ways to do that. I would probably make a setup function that kind of works like a constructor, but you really don't have to, because remember, all your member variables in Flash are public. So what you could say is you can just access them directly. So I'm going to go back to my main timeline. So here I am on the main timeline. I'm going to say, once I have created this child, I can talk about his X and his Y. I can also talk about his speed variable. And this will make him very slow, but I can just directly access his speed variable. When I do that, let me go back to my bullet movie clip here. No, let me go back to my bullet movie clip here. I should make this move based on his speed. And notice that's very slow, incredibly slow. But the moral of that story is, this variable is almost like a public member variable, so that the main timeline can just reference it directly. So once I have created the bullet, I could say, do whatever you want to. Okay, so now that's a little faster. Oh, you like the sound effect? Now, but another way, because you were going to have to tell him a few things, another way that you could communicate with him is you could make him a little setup function that can say, takes in the things that you need to inform him of, like his speed and his bearing. So it takes in those two things, almost like a constructor, and we'll set them up. And that would just allow you to, back on your main timeline, that would allow you to speak to this all in one line of code. So I could say, I want to set up my angle I haven't done anything with. I'm going to leave that to you because you know trigonometry. And I could say that I want his speed to be 25. And so that just would allow you, if you had some other things that you needed to tell him as well, instead of having to do a separate line for each variable assignment, you could just do this type of constructor almost setup function so that you could list them all out and save yourself a little room in your code. But except for that, seems strange. But that just is up to you, depending on how you want to trigger things. Oh, I have his speed and his bearing backwards. Let's try that again. But those are the basics of movement. Of course, here in your bullet, you will have to have your bearing set up. You'll have to do some trigonometry magic to make yourself move appropriately. Now, one last thing that you want to talk about is when you're moving, if you've left the screen, you need to remove this event listener so that you stop moving. The remove event listener syntax is exactly the same as add, except for with a remove. And you could also ask your parent, who is the main timeline, so you could also say movie clip root, to remove yourself, so that this thing is no longer going to be drawn or doesn't belong to the main timeline. So let's see if we can trigger that. Eventually, of course I did shoot that very slowly, eventually this thing will leave the screen and will trigger all of that code. to remove it from existence. And that's the basics of movement.